When you think of The Godfather, you remember a story of loyalty, power, and family above all else. But what happened after the cameras stopped rolling is far more unsettling than anything shown on screen. Some cast members died quietly. Some spent their final years confined to hospital beds, while others, once almost invisible, somehow became legends. What became of them by today will leave you genuinely shocked. Al Pacino as Michael Corleone. Michael Corleone, the quiet son who becomes a ruthless mafia leader in The Godfather, 1972, was played by Al Pacino. Pacino was 32 years old when restraint, silence, and internal violence became his signature. His performance felt controlled and distant. In truth, it was built on years of emotional survival. Alfredo James Pacino was born on April 25, 1940, in East Harlem, New York, into a life shaped by abandonment, insecurity, and constant emotional tension. Those early fractures surfaced powerfully in The Panic in Needle Park, 1971, where addiction and desperation mirrored feelings he knew too well. The role sharpened his vulnerability just as fame began to close in around him. That pressure deepened with Dog Day Afternoon, 1975, a performance fueled by anxiety and raw intensity. As expectations mounted, depression and substance dependence crept into his private life, and the physical toll followed: exhaustion, anxiety attacks, and later serious health scares that forced him to confront his limits. The work never stopped the pain, it only disguised it. Today, Al Pacino is 86 years old, still active through selective acting projects, and living primarily between New York and Los Angeles. Having survived depression, addiction, and a near-fatal illness, he now works by choice rather than necessity. His estimated net worth in 2026 is around $120 million, built from decades of landmark films and enduring cultural influence. Marlon Brando as Don Vito Corleone. Don Vito Corleone, the aging, feared patriarch in The Godfather, 1972, was portrayed by Marlon Brando. Brando was 48 years old when he transformed silence into authority and fear into legacy. His performance felt timeless and heavy, as if drawn from lived experience rather than rehearsal. That weight came from a lifetime already marked by inner collapse. Marlon Brando Jr. was born on April 3, 1924, in Omaha, Nebraska, growing up in an environment shaped by emotional neglect, instability, and fear. As a young man, he carried that tension directly into A Streetcar Named Desire, 1951, where his uncontrolled rage shocked audiences and permanently altered American acting. The role exposed him, forcing him to relive buried pain under bright lights. The pressure intensified with On the Waterfront, 1954, a film whose themes of betrayal and moral exhaustion mirrored his own inner life. While acclaim arrived, Brando's body began to rebel under the strain. Weight gain, chronic fatigue, and early signs of metabolic illness crept in, as stress hardened into routine. Emotional withdrawal deepened, and health anxieties quietly reshaped his days. By middle age, ambition faded into survival, and illness became a constant companion he rarely acknowledged aloud. Brando died at age 80 on July 1, 2004, from respiratory failure caused by pulmonary fibrosis at UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles. His body had been weakened by diabetes and chronic illness long before the end. He was cremated, and his ashes were scattered in Tahiti and Death Valley. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at approximately $30 million, drawn from decades of iconic performances and carefully negotiated late-career work. James Caan as Sonny Corleone. Sonny Corleone, the explosive, hot-headed eldest son in The Godfather, 1972, was played by James Caan. Caan was 32 years old when he brought raw violence and uncontrolled fury to the screen. His energy felt dangerous, almost uncontained. That intensity came from a man who had never truly known calm. James Edmund Caan was born on March 26, 1940, in the Bronx, New York, growing up under constant pressure to be tough, dominant, and emotionally sealed. As a young man, he learned early that weakness invited punishment, shaping a temperament that leaned toward aggression rather than vulnerability. That inner volatility surfaced powerfully in Brian's song, 1971, where grief and masculinity collided in ways that left him emotionally exposed just months before The Godfather. The role cracked him open, but fame quickly slammed the door shut again. After the success of The Godfather, the pressure to maintain that ferocity never eased. Films like The Gambler, 1974, and later Thief, 1981, reflected a man drawn to characters living on the edge, mirroring his own instability. During this period, depression, substance dependence, and coronary artery disease began to take hold, quietly eroding his health. Cocaine abuse in the 1980s worsened his condition, pushing his body into long cycles of exhaustion and recovery, and turning each comeback into a physical gamble. Sadly, Caan died at age 82 on July 6, 2022, in Los Angeles, from a heart attack linked to long-term coronary artery disease. His body had endured decades of strain before finally giving way. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at approximately $20 million, earned through a lifetime of performances driven by intensity rather than peace. Diane Keaton as Kay Adams. Kay Adams, the moral counterweight and conflicted wife in The Godfather, 1972, was played by Diane Keaton. Keaton was 26 years old when she stepped into a role defined by conscience rather than power. Her calm presence stood in sharp contrast to the violence around her. That quiet resistance became her signature. Diane Hall was born on January 5, 1946, in Los Angeles, California, growing up with a persistent sense of emotional displacement and self-doubt that followed her into adulthood. As she entered the industry, she battled intense insecurity and fear of being overlooked, pressures that sharpened during her rise in the early 1970s. Films like Play It Again, Sam, 1972, and later Annie Hall, 1977, forced her to turn personal vulnerability into performance. Success amplified her inner conflict instead of silencing it. As fame deepened, so did the private cost. Keaton struggled with chronic depression and eating disorders, conditions worsened by Hollywood's fixation on youth and image. While roles such as Looking for Mr. Goodbar, 1977, and Something's Gotta Give, 2003, showed emotional range, they were also reflections of her internal battles. Health concerns and emotional exhaustion shaped long periods of withdrawal from the spotlight. Keaton died at age 79 on October 11, 2025, in Los Angeles, from pneumonia following declining health. She left behind a formidable legacy built on courage rather than dominance. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at approximately $100 million, accumulated through decades of acclaimed films, directing work, and real estate investments. Robert Duvall as Tom Hagen. Tom Hagen, the calm, loyal consigliere in The Godfather, 1972, was portrayed by Robert Duvall. Duvall was 41 years old when he gave restraint, intelligence, and quiet suffering a face. He did not shout for power. He absorbed it silently. That strength came from his experiences in his real life. Robert Selden Duvall was born on January 5, 1931, in San Diego, California, raised in an environment where emotional distance and discipline shaped his inner world. As a young man, he learned to survive by listening rather than speaking, observing rather than demanding. Early performances such as To Kill a Mockingbird, 1962, and Tomorrow, 1972, reflected this inward gravity, roles defined by silence, loneliness, and moral weight rather than spectacle. That emotional restraint carried a cost. As his career expanded through demanding roles like Apocalypse Now, 1979, Duvall lived with long-term physical strain that followed decades of intense focus and repetition. Chronic joint pain, arthritis, and age-related deterioration slowly entered his life, limiting movement and demanding constant management. Now, Robert Duvall is 95 years old, living a secluded, peaceful life in Virginia, largely withdrawn from acting and focused on writing, reflection, and managing his land. Despite physical limitations, his mind remains sharp. His estimated net worth in 2026 is around $70 million, built steadily through discipline, longevity, and creative independence. Abe Vigoda as Salvatore Tessio. Salvatore Tessio, the calm strategist and eventual betrayer in The Godfather, 1972, was played by Abe Vigoda. Vigoda was 51 years old when quiet calculation masked fatal disloyalty. He did not threaten. He waited. Tessio's betrayal felt inevitable precisely because it was polite. Abraham Vigoda was born on February 24, 1921 in Brooklyn, New York, growing up with financial pressure, emotional restraint, and the need to appear older than he was from an early age. That heaviness never left his face. Years on stage before film trained him to express fatigue without words, a quality that later defined roles in The Godfather and Marat Sade, 1967. By the time he reached Hollywood recognition, his demeanor already carried decades of wear. After The Godfather, Vigoda's career took an unexpected turn. While film roles slowed, television brought renewed visibility through Barney Miller, 1975 to 1977, and its spin-off Fish. Yet fame came with a cruel twist, repeated false reports of his death, which followed him for decades and blurred public perception of his vitality. Vigoda died peacefully at age 94 on January 26, 2016, in Woodland Park, New Jersey, of natural causes while sleeping during a winter storm. He was buried at Beth David Cemetery in Elmont, New York, with notable figures in attendance. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at approximately $10 million, built steadily through theater, television, and longevity rather than stardom. Talia Shire as Connie Corleone. Connie Corleone, the emotionally volatile sister in The Godfather, 1972, was portrayed by Talia Shire. Shire was 26 years old when she gave fragility and rage a human face. Her performance was raw, unsettled, and deeply personal. It revealed the cost of power on those forced to live beside it. Talia Rose Coppola was born on April 25, 1946, in Lake Success, New York, growing up under the heavy shadow of expectation and comparison. From early on, she lived with the quiet pressure of being underestimated, a burden that intensified as her career unfolded. Roles in The Godfather, Part 2, 1974, and Rocky, 1976, demanded emotional exposure that mirrored her own inner struggles. Critical praise arrived, but the sense of being overshadowed never fully faded. As years passed, emotional strain translated into physical vulnerability. Shire endured long periods of depression, intensified by loss and chronic stress, alongside age-related health challenges that limited her work. Though performances continued, energy waned, and the weight of grief left lasting marks. Today, Talia Shire is 80 years old, living a peaceful, private life in California, largely removed from acting and focused on family and reflection. Despite health limitations, she remains mentally sharp and grounded. Her estimated net worth in 2026 is around $40 million, rooted in enduring royalties, long-term investments, and a legacy shared with two of cinema's most iconic franchises. John Cazale as Fredo Corleone. Fredo Corleone, the fragile, overlooked middle son in The Godfather, 1972, was portrayed by John Cazale. Cazale was 37 years old when quiet weakness became one of the most devastating presences in American cinema. He did not dominate scenes, he dissolved inside them. His pain lingered long after the dialogue ended. John Holland Cazale was born on August 12, 1935, in Revere, Massachusetts, growing up with a profound sense of inadequacy and emotional sensitivity that never hardened with age. He carried a constant fear of being replaceable, unseen, and unloved. That internal fracture surfaced powerfully in The Conversation, 1974, where paranoia and loneliness clung to him like a shadow. Each performance felt less like acting and more like confession. The weight intensified with Dog Day Afternoon, 1975, where his sadness was so visible that critics struggled to separate character from man. Cazale lived with chronic anxiety, physical frailty, and an unshakable sense of doom that followed him from stage to screen. In 1977, his body finally revealed the truth his performances had long suggested: lung cancer, aggressive and unforgiving. Even as pain spread through his bones, he insisted on finishing The Deer Hunter, 1978, filming while visibly ill, refusing to step away as his strength vanished. Cazale died at age 42 on March 13, 1978, in New York City, after months of rapid decline caused by lung cancer. He was buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Malden, Massachusetts, far from Hollywood's noise. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $2 million, modest and almost cruelly small compared to his legacy. Gianni Russo as Carlo Rizzi. Carlo Rizzi, the treacherous, abusive husband in The Godfather, 1972, was played by Gianni Russo. Russo was 29 years old when he embodied betrayal at the heart of the Corleone family. His presence felt uncomfortably real. The danger on screen never seemed entirely fictional. Gianni Vito Russo was born on December 12, 1943, in Manhattan, New York, and grew up surrounded by fear, volatility, and survival instincts, rather than safety. Illness marked him early. Polio in childhood left lasting physical and emotional scars, forcing him to learn toughness before tenderness. Those formative years taught him how easily power could turn violent, a lesson that later bled into roles like The Godfather and Lepka, 1975, where cruelty felt lived in, not performed. As adulthood arrived, tension followed him relentlessly. Russo carried constant anxiety linked to alleged underworld associations and a life lived under scrutiny, stress that weighed on both body and mind. Cardiovascular problems and chronic stress-related health issues emerged over time, worsened by years of confrontation and legal pressure. Films like The Freshman, 1990, and Any Given Sunday, 1999, kept him working, but the shadow of danger never fully lifted. Now, Gianni Russo is 83 years old, living quietly and largely removed from acting, focused on business ventures and reflection. His life slowed after decades of chaos rather than choice. His estimated net worth in 2026 is around $10 million, built from film work, wine ventures, and memoirs. Sterling Hayden as Captain McCluskey. Captain McCluskey, the corrupt, brutal police officer in The Godfather, 1972, was portrayed by Sterling Hayden. Hayden was 56 years old when moral decay and physical menace converged in one unforgettable figure. His authority felt oppressive. It was the performance of a man carrying lifelong regret. Sterling Relia Walter was born on March 26, 1916, in Upper Montclair, New Jersey, growing up with instability and early loss that fostered restlessness and inner conflict. His career highs, including The Asphalt Jungle, 1950, were shadowed by political pressure during the McCarthy era. When he testified before anti-communist hearings, the decision haunted him deeply, poisoning his sense of integrity and self-worth. That guilt fed long-term alcoholism and depression, eroding both health and relationships. Even later work like Dr. Strangelove, 1964, could not quiet the damage. By the 1970s, illness compounded the burden. Chronic physical decline and cancer slowly overtook him. His imposing stature masked a body and spirit in collapse. Hayden died at age 70 on May 23, 1986, in Sausalito, California, from prostate cancer after years of deteriorating health. He was cremated, leaving behind a complicated legacy of talent and regret. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at approximately $5 million, earned unevenly through film, writing, and years spent fleeing the industry he never fully trusted. Simonetta Stefanelli as Apollonia Vitelli. Apollonia Vitelli, the innocent Sicilian bride in The Godfather, 1972, was played by Simonetta Stefanelli. Stefanelli was only 18 years old when she embodied purity, fate, and sudden loss. Her presence was brief but unforgettable. The shock of her character's end defined her forever. Simonetta Stefanelli was born on November 30, 1954, in Rome, Italy, entering adulthood far too early under the gaze of international fame. Still a teenager, she faced intense pressure, objectification, and expectations she was emotionally unprepared for. After The Godfather, roles in European films such as Moses the Lawgiver, 1974, and Three Brothers, 1981, offered artistic respect but little protection from exploitation. That imbalance took a toll. Stefanelli spoke openly about refusing Hollywood offers that demanded nudity or typecasting, choices that limited her career but preserved her autonomy. The strain manifested in emotional exhaustion and midlife health issues, quietly pushing her away from acting. By the early 1990s, the weight of public attention and private stress led her to step back completely. Today, Simonetta Stefanelli is 72 years old, living a private life in Italy, far from the spotlight. She shifted her creative energy into entrepreneurship, running a fashion boutique and designing accessories. Her estimated net worth in 2026 is around $5 million, built from past film work and long-term business independence. Lettieri as Virgil Sollozzo. Virgil Sollozzo, the calculating narcotics broker in The Godfather, 1972, was portrayed by Lettieri. Lettieri was 44 years old when he gave the film its coldest, most quietly dangerous presence. He spoke softly, negotiated calmly, and radiated inevitability. Sollozzo did not feel like a villain created for cinema. He felt like someone who already existed. Alfredo Anthony Lettieri was born on February 24, 1928, in New York City, carrying the tension of a man who never quite belonged anywhere safely. His early life was marked by cultural pressure, silence, and proximity to power he could not control, shaping a guarded personality that leaned toward observation rather than trust. That internal distance defined performances in The Night of the Following Day, 1969, and The Godfather, where menace emerged not from violence but from restraint. After The Godfather, Lettieri found himself trapped in a narrow corridor of roles. Films like The Getaway, 1972, and Mr. Majestic, 1974, kept him employed, but they also cemented his image as a disposable antagonist. The pressure of typecasting, irregular work, and professional frustration accumulated quietly. By the mid-1970s, chronic stress, heavy drinking, and worsening heart health had become part of his daily reality, eroding both physical strength and emotional resilience. Lettieri died suddenly at age 47 on October 18, 1975, in New York City, from a heart attack that gave no warning and no second chance. He was still working, still hoping for reinvention. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $1 million, modest for an actor whose face helped define one of cinema's most enduring films. Morgana King as Carmela Corleone. Carmela Corleone, the loyal, long-suffering wife of Don Vito in The Godfather, 1972, was played by Morgana King. King was 42 years old when she turned silence into authority and endurance into grief. She rarely spoke, yet when she appeared, the weight of decades filled the room. Maria Grazia Morgana Messina was born on June 4, 1930, in Pleasantville, New York. growing up with early loss and responsibility that hardened her emotional discipline. Balancing two demanding identities, international jazz vocalist and serious actress, created constant inner tension. Albums like For You, For Me, Forevermore 1956 brought critical praise, while The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2 1974 introduced her to a global audience that rarely understood how much restraint her performances required. Years of touring, recording, and emotional containment took a visible toll. King lived with chronic fatigue, physical strain, and mounting health problems, even as she continued to perform with elegance. The demands of maintaining artistic credibility in both music and film left little room for rest. Over time, illness began to dictate her pace, pushing her away from the spotlight and into quieter spaces where survival mattered more than acclaim. King died at age 87 on March 22, 2018, in Palm Springs, California, from non-Hodgkin lymphoma after a prolonged decline. She left behind a legacy defined not by excess, but by endurance. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at approximately $3 million, earned steadily through decades of music, film, and unwavering discipline. Richard S. Castellano as Peter Clemenza. Peter Clemenza, the loyal old-school capo regime in The Godfather, 1972, was portrayed by Richard S. Castellano. Castellano was 39 years old when he gave warmth, menace, and dark humor to one of the film's most human figures. His presence felt reassuring and dangerous at the same time. Clemenza was not flashy power, he was tradition. Richard Salvatore Castellano was born on September 4, 1933, in the Bronx, New York, growing up surrounded by economic pressure, cultural expectations, and the quiet burden of replacing a deceased sibling whose name he carried. Those early tensions shaped a performer drawn to inner conflict rather than glamour. Before The Godfather, his breakout in Lovers and Other Strangers, 1970, earned him an Academy Award nomination, exposing vulnerability beneath bravado. The success raised expectations that Hollywood would never fully satisfy. After The Godfather, Castellano's career entered a painful plateau. Disputes with Francis Ford Coppola over creative control and compensation kept him out of The Godfather Part 2, a decision that haunted his trajectory. Television work like The Super, 1972, and Joe and Sons, 1975 to 1976, provided visibility but not prestige. The stress of stalled momentum, financial pressure, and professional frustration slowly affected his health, as cardiovascular problems and chronic stress became constant companions. Castellano died at age 55 on December 10, 1988, in North Bergen, New Jersey, from a heart attack that ended plans for reinvention. He was still developing a book on acting theory at the time of his death. His net worth was estimated at around $2 million, earned unevenly through stage, film, and television. They ruled the screen with power, loyalty, and betrayal, but time rewrote every ending. Behind the legendary performances were fragile bodies, broken careers, and lives that changed in ways the camera never captured. Some faded quietly. Others endured far longer than anyone expected. So when you look back at The Godfather now, do you still see the characters or the cost of becoming them? Stay with us, subscribe, and tell us in the comments which transformation shocked you the most.